Welcome to Make and Decorate, a podcast for makers who love to sew, quilt, knit, and decorate. Hello, everyone. It is now November, and our clocks were turned back an hour to officially welcome the increasingly short and dark days of the rest of the year. It's so melodramatic, I know, but true. So I'm hoping this episode will brighten your day because my guest is Katrina Walker, known for her garment sewing with expertise in wool and silk textiles, as well as being a national educator for FOF sewing machines. And I'm going to do a super short chit chat right now. You may be able to tell that my voice is a bit scratchy, and I don't know. I have something. I think it's a sinus infection. But anyway, that's why my voice sounds the way it does. But hopefully you can get through it. We did record the guest segment in July, so my voice is perfectly fine during that segment. The only chit-chat topic I have is to talk to you about last weekend when I went to the Chicago Modern Quilt Guild's fall retreat. And that was held at a hotel right here in Chicago. I've been to several local retreats and events in the past, but I've never stayed overnight at the hotel. So this time I decided to go ahead and stay at the hotel and experience the entire, everything about the event. And it was great. It was so great. There were about 40 of us in a large meeting room where we set up our own sewing tables. We had our own little spots, and they were grouped in like 4 tables, and you faced a person. So 2 people facing another 2 people, and then there was like a little aisle for circulation, walking around. And we all brought snacks in to share, and people brought fabric scraps and books and any other types of notions or whatever for anyone to take. And I brought a bunch of fat quarters and about a half a bundle of some leftover Christmas jelly roll strips. And they all were picked up, which was good because that was one of the things, was that if your stuff wasn't taken, you had to scoop it back up and take it back with you. I did pick up a few scraps, fabrics that I liked to add to my stash. So it was almost like curating my own swag bag to take home. And it was a lot of fun. Everybody found something that they liked and got excited about. So it's a lot of fun. I mean, I tried to bring fabrics that I thought other modern quilters would love and that I haven't used yet. And if I've had them for, more than a couple years, then I brought those and was so happy to see when I saw someone picking up some of those. So it was a lot of fun. And there was a lot of productivity at this retreat. Someone at my table in the section actually I was at finished quilting and added binding to 2 full quilts and then another half of another quilt, which was amazing. I don't know if I could get have the focus to get it done, but she did really well. And her quilts looks absolutely stunning. So kudos to her because she got a lot done. And I got, I got a nice amount done, I think. More than if I were to have stayed home and then procrastinated on working on it, which a lot of us actually did talk about. So I'm not the only one that kind of has that issue. But, well, let me see. So another person brought her grandmother's quilt top that was hand appliqued and very old. I mean, it pretty much looked like an antique quilt top, just similar like to the quilt top that I have from my great grandmother, all hand pieced. And she was working on one of the big round tables in a second room that we had. Um, and she was working on hand basting it to continue to finish the quilt as it was meant to be with hand stitching. And I'm not sure, but I think she will be hand quilting it as well. So what I finished was a baby quilt top. I started this quilt top. Here we go. About 3 years ago, because that is how old my nephew is now. He's a little 3-year-old toddler, and this is his baby quilt. It's not like a little tiny, postage stamp type baby quilt. So it's big enough that he could certainly use it as a lap quilt. And it is the pattern is Elizabeth Hartman's Fancy Forest. And it's so cute because it's got the faces of all of the forest type animals, like an owl, a fox, a hedgehog. The hedgehog is so cute. A bunny. And then there is like a tall thistle flower. It's such a beautiful quilt. I love her patterns. They're just really well done, and they're so cute. And they are not foundation paper pieced. And people were shocked to hear that it wasn't foundation paper piecing, and that basically all that her patterns are made from are from strips cut at different sizes. And then there are, in order to get some of the angles and shapes that create these cute little animal faces, are stitch and flips and other types of things. I think there might have been like a stitch and flip, like elongated rectangle that then turns it into this triangle shape. So it's not really that bad. You just have to be very organized. And I had every block, animal block, in its own Ziploc bag with all of its pieces. And that really helped a ton to stay organized. And there's not really, I mean, I guess you could try it, but chain piecing is not really a great idea with this kind of pattern. I had it almost done, the quilt top. All of the animals were done. I just needed to finish adding the sashing strips to it. And also I made the backing, pieced that together. There's a little tweak I have to do on the backing, and then it can be basted and quilted and bound. So I got that done. And then I added, this was like a last minute thought, but I started these pumpkins, and I talked about this last year. So if you've been listening for a while, this will sound familiar to you, but I started Minky Kim's stuffed pumpkins, fabric pumpkins. There's 3 sizes, and I cut out all the pieces for a small, medium, and large, and got through almost to the part where you start piecing the pieces together. So there's a bit of prep work where you cut out all the pieces. I also cut out the wool fabric for the stems. And then you need to kind of embroider running stitch a thick thread down the center of each of these pieces. They're kind of like orange peel pieces. I think they are, sort of. And they create that round pumpkin shape, but the stitching cinches up a bit and creates those shapes around a pumpkin. So that was all done. I just needed to stitch them all together and stuff it and close it and make the stem, putting the wire in it so that it can bend to be a curly Q. And they turned out so cute. I got 2 of those done. So that was for me, I thought it was fairly productive. There were a few other things that I started to work on. I brought some hand piecing projects for in the evening. Didn't really get far on those. And I did bring my new Creo yarn that I was talking about in the autumnal color to start that Pico edge hem hat. But I forgot. I didn't use my winder to prepare for that. I just tossed those skeins into the bag, not thinking that, oh, this has to be wound first. Like either in a, if you don't have a yarn winder, then it's just easy enough to roll the skein into a ball. It just takes a bit of time. So I did do one of the skeins into a ball at this event, and got that done. And then I actually did start the knitting of the hat, but not until I got back. So I figured out how to do that provisional cast on, which is the first step of this pattern. And there's plenty of YouTube videos on how to do that. It's done with a crochet hook and one of the knitting needles, and it's fairly easy. So that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, which is good. And so yeah, I just had a really fun weekend. I got to spend time with friends and meet some new friends. And that shot of creative adrenaline was just what I needed. And I think I wasn't the only one. I feel like the energy is definitely infectious, and everyone was so happy. It's interesting because it started Friday afternoon, and people just filed in when they could. Some people had to work, like I had to work a little bit in the morning. And then Friday was just sort of like I guess, the icebreaker thing. So, people were a little bit more quiet and stuff. And then by like the end of the night, it started to get a bit more festive. And then Saturday was the day where we were all just like in it. I mean, we were all talking to everybody, and people were showing things as they were finishing them. There was this little bellhop hotel bell at a counter in the center of the room. And so anytime you would finish something, it didn't even have to be a completely finished project. You could finish a quilt top, or you could finish a pillow cover, anything like that. You would ring the bell, and then you would sort of show off what you had just accomplished, and everybody would ooh and ah and clap. So that was a lot of fun. And I think it helps motivate you to, continue on when you get all of that positive reinforcement from your friends. So it was really great. And the other cool thing is that we had the time change on Saturday night, which gave us an extra hour of sleep, which I desperately needed because I stayed up really late that night sewing. And then we all packed it up on Sunday afternoon and headed home. And I was so exhausted and could not wait to just Netflix and chill and hydrate. Even though I brought like my, whatever water bottle thingy, I just like when you start sewing, and I do this at home too, when you get like really into the project, I just forget to like take time out to hydrate and drink. So I had to get rehydrated, and yeah, it was just, I had such a great feeling afterwards. And then I did, increasingly like have the sore throat and the sinus issues, and here we are today, but still had the best time. And that creative energy and inspiration shared at the retreat has stayed with me all week. So hopefully I will be well enough to attend this coming Saturday. There is the Renegade Craft Fair in the city. So hopefully, at least even if we go for a couple hours. But I think it'll be fine because I mean I will have had this like sinus thing for at least 6 days by then, so it should be better. Uh, and yeah, so that's it. I just wanted to share about my experience with the Chicago Modern Quilt Guild. And if any of you guys are listening from the guild, thank you so much. I had the best time. And thanks to Omale, she did so much work in preparing this event for us. She coordinated all of that. I think she's in like, I don't even know what it's called, the programming part. If I'm wrong, just forgive me. But I mean, it's just everything, every detail was really taken care of, and it just made everything so smooth and so much fun. So now let's move on to my conversation with Katrina Walker. The guest on today's episode is Katrina Walker, an industry educator, author, and designer. Katrina loves to sew and teach sewing from clothing construction to gorgeous embellishments with machine embroidery. And she's been on TV, Craftsy. She's featured on magazines galore like Threads. And most recently, I met her at the H&H Americas show this past May, where she was at the FAF sewing machine booth. So hello, Katrina. Welcome to the Make and Decorate podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such an honor. And I just have to say that it was just too funny the way I met you at the sewing booth, because you were doing something so fascinating on the machine. It's kind of a newish feature, which we'll talk about later, but it was sewing on this ribbon, like automatically just about. And so you started talking about it. And then I thought, this voice, I know it. And then you looked up and I looked at you and I was like, Katrina Walker.
I'm like a bad penny, I always turn up. I'm in the darndest places,
Awesome. It was so awesome. I was so fangirling. So thank you for taking the time. Even you just took so much time to talk with me, and it was so pleasant meeting you in person.
Yeah. It's always fun. Because that's the only downside of teaching so much online and everything is that I have to remind myself to get out, force myself to go on the road once in a while, just because then you actually get to meet people. That's the fun part of the job, It makes up for all the work.
Yeah.
It's a ton of work. So
I'm sure. I know it is. I just don't even know how you do it all. Reading through all the stuff you do.
It's been exhausting.
A whole lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure. But so yeah, you do have a very interesting story of your journey into the home sewing industry. So I thought maybe you could share just from like the first days of sewing to the point of when you actually began your sewing career.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Welcome to Untethered and Wanderwise, where adventure has no age limit. We're your co-host, Heidi Brandis and Nikki Mahundro, and we're here to inspire and celebrate women over 45 who are embracing their independence and want to explore the world on their own terms.
Well, I grew up on a wheat farm in central Eastern Washington. So most people don't realize that Washington State is actually a very large portion, half if not 2/3. Anyway, a very large portion of Washington State, everything east of the Cascade Mountains, is actually high desert. And so where I grew up, there's no trees. We're in the Evergreen State. It's not very green where I grew up, at least not this time of year.
I had no idea.
Yeah, most of Washington State, a big chunk of it is actually high desert. And so I grew up on a wheat farm. And that part of the state is also, of course, very hot and very cold, depending on the time of year. So where I grew up, well, number one, the nearest grocery store is about 30 miles away. So you don't get out much.
Oh my gosh.
And there were 5 of us in my graduating class. And that's a public high school that was actually 3 towns full of, but when it's wheat farming communities, farming families aren't as big as they used to be, and they're pretty spread out. So you just don't have a whole lot of kids. And so anyhow, my brother actually only had 2 in his class, clear up until like senior year. And then some kids moved in for some inexplicable reason. So at any rate, the point is, this is a part of the world where, you can literally get snowed in the wintertime. And so, what do you do when you're snowed in? You sew, you cook, you do these things. So when I actually ended up going back east to school. I went to Wellesley College in Massachusetts. And it was kind of funny because, all of my, most of my schoolmates, they came from much different backgrounds than myself. And, just like, how do you know how to do all this stuff? It's like, well, I grew up on a farm and there's just nothing else to do. I mean, it's like, you better have skills because otherwise you'll go crazy. You can't just pop off to the mall or go see a movie anytime you feel like it. It's so anyway, so sewing is just something I grew up with. Honestly, I didn't really give it much thought. I mean, I've been using a serger since I think I was 12 years old. I know I was in junior high, like late junior high when Mom bought it. So it was sometime in the mid 80s. And luckily for me back then, stirrup pants and tunic sweatshirts were a big thing. And back then, believe it or not, you could buy fabric just about anywhere. So even like the local, I think it was like a Sprouse Reeds. Anyway, think of it as like a local, say, a Target, basically. I mean, any kind of like just general goods kind of housewares kind of place would sell fabric. And so it's so readily available. And I know I feel really old saying all these things, but anyhow, so I could crank out, buying clothes was more of a challenge because there weren't a lot of clothing stores, but you could buy fabric. So I had quite the collection of shorts and T-shirts and things that I would whip up on that serger because my mom was afraid of the serger. So it was all mine basically. So I actually became more proficient on the sergers than I did on the sewing machine just because that was more readily available. I didn't have to wait my turn on that. So and like I said, stirrup pants were so in. So I had them in many colors, but anyhow, so I didn't really give it much thought. It was just something you did, something you do, and there was always something that needed to be sewn up. And I'm a clothes horse. I was born that way. And so, any opportunity to put more clothes in the closet always makes me happy. So, but then when I graduated from college, I ended up actually, like a good Wellesley girl, I went into investment banking. Not sure how I ended up there, but I did. And so then I needed business suits and I needed cocktail dresses. I needed all these things. And I'm 5'10". So it's really hard to find things off the rack when you're in Amazon. And so you have to, being able to sew was really great because I could whip up really nice looking clothes. At that time, I lived in Washington, D.C. And so like G Street Fabrics was, I don't know, maybe a 10, 15 minute drive. It was not that far. So I basically, investment banking is very intense. So if I wasn't at work, I was basically sewing, and that was my stress relief. And, over time I realized, I enjoy this a lot more than I enjoy investment banking. And so when I moved back to Washington State, I actually, my employment initially was running a 4-H program over on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. And so 4-H encompasses a lot of different kinds of things. And so one of the things that I really encouraged during my tenure there running the 4-H program was textile arts. And it's kind of helped get it kind of a multi, what do I say? Like we did silk dyeing. We did a lot of different things. When I was there for, as part of just a general textile art program to help encourage kids to get more into sewing and more into that sort. And I would go to like horse camp, and at horse camp, I would teach the kids how to make the, they call them sleazies, but they're hoods to go over the horses to keep their manes nice after you wash them before you go to the show ring. So we would make things. So we'd get the horse kids sewing and the sheep kids sewing, covers for their sheep and all these things. So I did my best to introduce clothing and textiles. So I had then spent a year teaching home ec. Actually, these days it's called Family and Consumer Sciences. But if you say Family and Consumer Sciences, not everybody understands what that is. But basically, it's home ec, what we used to call home ec. So I spent a year teaching home ec at the local high school. And then they had a levy failure, so I got riffed along with all the other first-year teachers. And And so I said, heck with this. And I was tired of poverty. And so I went to Seattle. I went to work for Nordstrom and ended up in product development for Nordstrom. I'd been working on my master's in clothing and textiles during this time. So
okay.
I started out as an assistant in the technical design department, but then pretty quickly moved into raw materials and was the raw materials liaison for Nordstrom Product Group for a number of years. And that's the person that you don't get to pick out any of the stuff. Like, I don't get to choose fabrics or anything, but when the designers pick it out, they'd bring it to me, and it was up to me to correctly identify it, catalog. I mean, basically, when a garment is made, there's a what's called a specification pack or a spec pack, and it's like the recipe for that garment, and it lists everything. It has not just the dimensions of the garment itself, but it also has the recipe of, it's X number of meters of this fabric, and it's this thread, and it's this many stitches per inch, and it's, it's this zipper and this. I mean, it's all in there. So it was my job to make sure that all of that information was accurate for importing and things. And then
well, that's interesting.
Yeah. So that's kind of the professional side. So then how did it, okay. So then I know this is kind of a long story, my apologies, but it's been a very strange,
good. That's what this
it's been a long, strange path. Yeah. Well, it's been a long, strange path, because, you look back through your life and sometimes you think, this has been so random, gosh, I have no purpose. But, it's funny how serendipity works. And, serendipity is actually a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck, but you have to be ready when the door opens, you have to be ready and willing to do whatever it takes to walk through it. I mean, that's just kind of how it works. So while I was running the 4-H program, I had gone through training as a clothing and textile advisor for Washington State University. So that was at Washington State University, the clothing and textile advisor program. It's now a separate organization, but anyhow, at that time it was part of WSU, and it's like being a master gardener, only it's like a master clothing and textile person. So I'd gone through that training, and through that I'd become involved with the Sewing and Stitchery Expo in Puyallup, which at that time was the biggest consumer sewing show in the country. So I'd been involved with that since the late 90s. So anyway, so flash forward, I'm working Nordstrom Product Group as a raw material liaison, and I decided to enter the National Make It With Wool competition. This was 20 years ago. So this was in 2004, 20 years ago. And at that time I was going through some really personal, I was about to go through a divorce. There were a lot of layoffs going on at Nordstrom. It was a bad time. Okay. It was a really, really dark time, but I decided I wanted to do the competition, and I was so down financially, I couldn't even afford to buy fabric. But because I worked at Nordstrom Product Group, when the designers would be throwing out the sample pieces, and some of them were up to a meter, but I had like some pieces like an eighth, a quarter of a meter but any rate, so, needless to say, I went dumpster diving at work regularly. And so I had quite the little stash of sample fabrics that were just going to be thrown away. And so that's what I actually made my outfit from. So my jacket, I think I had 6 different fabrics in my jacket. And then a friend of mine at work donated the black wool for my skirt. I was able to squeeze out a little black bodysuit to wear under the jacket out of a boiled wool sample, a lightweight boiled wool sample. So anyway, so it was just in fact, actually the most decorative detail, and if I thought of it, I would have grabbed the jacket. It's in storage above my head here. But the jacket, I ended up putting these diamond inset sleeve design down each sleeve, using Seminole piecework. And the reason I did that was because I didn't have enough fabric to cut sleeves. So again, I'm tall. It takes a lot of fabric to cut a sleeve, and I just didn't have enough to cut upper sleeves. So, after I got done probably crying, I don't cry a lot, but this was a dark time. And it occurred to me, I had seen a Givenchy jacket, a vintage Givenchy jacket that had these, it was like reverse applique with diamonds, but it was grosgrain ribbon that had been folded in the opening to create this diamond effect that was really cool. Well, I'd already chosen a ribbon for a closure that had the fabrics I was using were all shades of brown. And I'd found a ribbon that had like black diamonds on brown, and that was what was my closure anyway. And so it occurred to me I could use Seminole piecework to piece a diamond motif, and that could be a big strip to go down the center of the upper sleeve, and then I could actually probably piece in enough to cut. And that's what I did, and it worked out.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. The Seminole is, didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's a type of beaded decorative.
No, Seminole
beading, right?
piecework is a type of quilting piecing.
Oh,
so with
how come I don't know that? I'm a quilter.
I don't know. Well, now you'll have to look it up. So Seminole piecework
I will.
Yeah, so Seminole piecework is basically strip piecing. So you do strip piecing and you do it in such a way that then you cut it on the diagonal. So it's actually always on the bias, which can be a bit challenging.
Okay.
I know you've seen it. You just forgot what it was called.
Yeah.
I know you've seen it umpteen times. But anyhow, well, I like to teach quilters to use. I like sneaking garment construction techniques to quilters, and I like making garment sewists use quilting things too. So it just kind of goes with my aesthetic. But anyhow, so as it turned out, an even longer story short, I actually ended up winning the national Make It With Wool contest with my outfit made of donations and scraps. So that was 20 years ago. So at the same time, like literally within a month or so of officially accepting my award and everything, I'm sitting at my desk at Nordstrom, and again, I'm probably. I was so thin with the divorce diet. Because I just really couldn't afford to eat. So any race, I'm sitting at my desk. This is actually relevant. I was sitting at my desk, and I get a call from Joanne Ross, who had founded the Sewing Stitchery Expo, and then she was still in charge at that time. But she calls me up on my desk, and I'd worked for her at times when I still lived in Port Townsend. And anyway, so she calls me up on my desk. She's like, "Katrina, we need a model. Get down here." I was like, "Joanne, I can't model because, I have 30, even when I'm really thin, I have like 39.5-inch hips. You may be thinking, well, that's not that big. But remember that models are supposed to be no larger than 36, 26, 36. I know this because, at any rate, because when you're 5'10", people try to get you to model and you're like, no, I can't. I'm too large. Sorry.
Because you're tall.
Yeah, it goes with the territory. Trust me. But at any rate, I'm not built for it. But back then I was really thin. And so anyway, but it was $400 a day. It paid $400 a day, and it was and 4 days of work. I literally could not afford to say no. Like I had to take unpaid. Right. I didn't have any time off because I'd been so sick. I'd been sick all the time because of all the stress. So I had to take unpaid time from work. But, it was still coming out ahead financially to go down and work.
Sure.
So because so then, like I said, believe me, there is a point here. So, so I went down, and at that time, so there were 6 style shows a day. It was grueling. You had 10 changes every 45. So every show was 45 minutes, and each model had 10 changes per show. So believe me, it was a grueling, 10 changes. So we each had our own team of dressers to throw the clothes on and off our backs. It was grueling. Really grueling. It was definitely an interesting introduction to doing runway modeling. But anyhow, so I had my outfit with me because also at the end of the day, after those shows were over, there was a separate style show to help promote the wool contest and the 4-H kids and that. So I was modeling because I was the new adult winner for the wool contest. I had to model at that too. So then I'd jump into that outfit and go run across the fairgrounds to that. So my outfit was there. So that's how I met, because of this random modeling gig for which I actually am not physically suited for. I ended up meeting at that time all of the major players in the home sewing industry. So, Patty Palmer has been a great friend and mentor. Dana Bontrager, she had a style show. I modeled for Martha Pullen, for, Linda Lee. Ooh. Basically anyone who had a pattern line or whatever had a style show. And I worked for all of them. And they found out that I was just faking the whole model thing, but that I really was a sewist, an actually fairly well-educated sewist. And and then immediately within, things just happen sometimes, when you're on the bottom, sometimes you start bouncing back up. And so within about a month or two of that, I ended up meeting my second husband, hopefully my last husband, I should say. And and he made it possible for me to leave Nordstrom, and he was self-employed, and he gave me the financial space to say, what do you want to do? And I thought, well, it's really kind of nice to be able to work from home if I can. And so that's kind of how I started down the road of, I thought, I'd already been doing a lot of sewing education because, when I was working for running the 4-H program, of course, I was doing education of all kinds all the time. I still kept doing that on more of a volunteer basis. Even when I was working at Nordstrom, I still was teaching for 4-H events and for conferences. And so I kept all that up. I was still on the state clothing and textiles committee for 4-H. I was still active as a clothing and textile advisor through WSU. So I took a part-time job with Quality Sewing and Vacuum in the Seattle area. And they are probably still the largest sewing machine dealership, probably in the world. And so it just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But anyway, I became part of their Educator team. And that's great training. It was great training. And it was pretty easy for me because it was pretty much the same stuff. I'd already been doing it. So, even though it seemed kind of random, the reality is when I look back through my life, I realized that, all of this has been building on for decades, many, many decades. But officially, It all truly came together and began about 20 years ago. So yeah, kind of a long story, but
I knew you had an interesting story. I knew it, I only knew a fraction of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's like,
That's
it's
amazing.
like, how do you really explain it without? It's hard to make it real condensed.
It's so cool. I mean, and it's true because you really cannot buy or learn experience, or
No.
You know what I mean? Like just the years of experience that you get from everything that you've done. And just so for people that aren't familiar with 4-H, it stands for like what, husbandry or something? And
no, the 4-H's are head, heart, hands, and health. Yeah. So the 4-H's are head, heart, hands, and health because you pledge your head to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, and my health to better living for my club, my community, my country, and my world. Wow. So 4-H encompasses. I don't know
why I thought it was that, because you show like your animals and your
that's very traditional 4-H. Well, 4-H it's a youth development organization that is it's connected to most states. Most, if not all states, have what's called a land grant university. So in Washington State, that would be Washington State University. In New York, it's Cornell. In California, I think it's UC Davis. Anyway, so every state, for the most part, has what they call a land grant university, where the state gave the land to create university, and that's what we call cooperative extension comes from. And so back when we were more of an agrarian society, then yes, it was much more. But 4-H these days really encompass, I mean, yes, it's still what they call cows, corn, chickens, and cooking or whatever. I mean, it's like you still have kind of some of the traditional stuff, but it really are, hogs and horses or whatever you want to call it. But it's these days, you can have a 4-H club that focuses on anything. The main thing that we're trying to teach the kids, again, it's a youth development organization. We're trying to teach them, they learn record keeping. So they have to set goals. They have to set a goal for themselves. They have to set secondary goals. So when they choose a project, they have to set goals for that project, what they want to achieve that year. They have to keep records of the time they spend working on it, on any expenses, especially like with livestock. Obviously, you've got the expense of the animal, you've got, all kinds of records involved with it. But even with sewing and things, how much did you buy your fabric for? How much did how much did it cost you to make that dress or whatever, and so, and it can be, but that can be applied with modern 4-H. You can have a club that say is scrapbooking. You can have a scrapbooking club. You can have a photography club. You can have anything. You can have a social media club, but you just have to have projects. You have to set a project or, kind of this is our focus. And then you set goals for yourself. So, it just helps kids learn some, it's supposed to help teach life skills. I mean, that's the bottom line, life skills. Be good citizens.
That's so great. Yeah.
Sorry. You didn't know you were going to get a lecture on 4-H.
No, I'm glad I asked. Because I really didn't understand it as the modern thing that it is today. And I really wish that it would, get more visibility, actually, because I feel like that type of education is really what,
it's very needed.
99% of us do with our lives,
Right. It is 99. It's called adulting, right? We're just teaching adulting.
Yeah.
And like one of the things I was heavily involved with when I was doing more work late, in the last few years, I was on the Washington State 4-H Fair Board for the state fair for, well over a decade. I've got a plaque on the wall there that says something about it. But at any rate, I had to resign once my career got a little bit too hectic. But judging is something that, I participate. I've actually been paid to evaluate livestock. I can say that honestly. And I used to help coach the state livestock judging team, which, these are things that I did as a kid that I never thought I would ever do as an adult. So it's been kind of hilarious, actually. But yeah, it's kind of funny. There's a lot of people who just can't quite picture me standing in an arena full of hogs, but been there, done that. But at any rate, but like judging in a judging competition, the kids are taught how to, well, number one, for whatever you're judging, there's usually some kind of standard. If it's an animal, there's some kind of breed standard that the ideal animal should look like this. And then you're given 4 choices and you put them in order from the most desirable to least desirable choice. Not that any of them are bad, but just, what would be the most ideal to the least ideal. And then the kids have to actually, there's that aspect of it. And then we have something called oral reasons. Kids have to get up and give a reasoned argument why they put things in the order they did. And, I've had youth, youth psychiatrists tell me, young people, they can't make a reasoned argument until they're 21 or something. I'm just like, I've got 14-year-old 4-Hers who can get up and give you a darn good argument for why they put things in the order they, exactly what their reasoning is. Well, I think these are people that study. I think these are people that study criminals. Well, I mean, I think they're studying. Not, let's not say the best and brightest. Okay, then maybe some of them can't make a reason. I don't think some of them can ever make a reasoned argument. So, or a reasoned decision. But anyway, I digress. But anyhow, 4-H is a great thing.
No, it's wonderful. And it's nice that you had made such great contributions to that. And it sounds to me as you talk about it that it's seemed to be rewarding for you as well.
Absolutely.
Just to, yeah.
Well, volunteerism, it's a fact that volunteerism is good for you.
Yeah, definitely. And okay, so that's how you got to where you started just doing what you do today, which is a lot. And we'll just kind of touch on some highlights here because you do an awful lot, which is great because it shows that your passion for it clearly shows, and it's infectious, which is what I love because it inspires me. You've always inspired me. I've been following you for at least since 2010 or so. And I purchased your Craftsy class all those years ago with your seams, the different seams.
Yes. It's a terrible name, but it's a great class. Yeah.
It is a great class. I refer to it a lot, and I'm so glad that I have forever. As many changes as Craftsy went through, the one great thing that they did was honor the lifetime access to what you purchased. And
yes.
Which is good because I do go back there and I mean, you go through like just a simple top stitch all the way through like different types of flat felt seams and the one thing I'll never forget were those amazing silk prairie points.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I had quite the argument with my producer about that. Well, not argument per se, but I remember Trisha Waddell is who I worked with on, that was my first Craftsy class, and it's still my favorite in most ways. And I remember she was like, prairie points. I'm like, Trisha, I'll make them chic, I promise. Like,
You
So it goes back
did.
to the
You
whole
really,
quilting
really
thing. Like,
did.
yeah, I'm like, prayer
Yeah.
points can be chic. Well, and as I think I mentioned in class, I mean, I got the idea from a Richard Tyler jacket. I mean, it wasn't like, I came up with the idea of using prairie points for couture. I mean, I have a Richard Tyler jacket in my personal collection that has prairie points along the inside chest
See?
pocket. So it's like, it wasn't
Yeah.
even my idea, I just ran
Yeah,
with
but
it.
it's wonderful to you did, and beautifully, and I love it. And it is interesting to have that crossover with quilting and clothes sewing, and I do both, and so I appreciate, and I also do borrow stuff that I've learned from sewing clothing to, especially like hand sewing techniques, over to quilting. Because I did learn that you didn't have to make a knot when you're doing like hand sewing closures or whatever. You start farther back from it, and you know what I mean. You put your needle in,
do a
and then
tiny little back stitch, and you're good to go.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you
Yep.
clip off the tail, and it just gets lost inside. So I mean, those are one of those techniques that you use for the rest of your life, as long as you keep sewing, and any type of sewing. So it's really great. And now you are the reason why you were at that H&H show is that for your National Educator hat that you wear for, and I saw you at the FAF booth. So you want to talk about that, and the thing you could talk also about, because I think it's a new feature on one of their machines. You were sewing this ribbon on to fabric, but it was sort of like making this folded, really cool latticey curve, swizzle kind of design. But go ahead and talk about that.
Okay. Well, I mentioned that one of my first official jobs, I mean, even though I've been working toward this basically all my life, if I really kind of look at it that way, training for it all my life, I should say. But one of my first official jobs was working for Quality Sewing. And at that time, their primary brand was FOF. And I had been a customer of theirs since 1995, which was when I bought my first machine from them, which was actually a serger, because I already had a sewing machine hand-me-down, but I didn't have a serger. So I bought a serger from them in 1995. And then I bought my first top of the line sewing machine with embroidery in 1998. And so, from which I used, of course, to go on and win the wool contest. So I'd already been a customer of theirs, even though I was very young at the time. But so when I joined their education team, so that really was kind of my entree into getting involved in the sewing machine world, in terms of really staying up to date on all the latest, up to date on the software. So I'd also bought the software clear back in 1998, which, trust me, is nothing like our software now. It was, right. I mean, when people like, well, they think it's, hard or whatever, I just feel like saying, you know what, this is so easy compared to what it used to be like. It's like, I don't know what you're complaining about, because, 30 some years ago, it was a lot harder here 30 years ago.
I mean, you're basically writing code to do something.
Right. I mean, literally like placing,
long ago.
I mean, it had a certain amount of tracing ability, but yeah, I mean, you were literally like placing stitch by stitch. But,
right.
Yeah, back in the day. But anyhow, so because they're the largest sewing machine dealership, everyone knows them, and they have a fair amount of clout. And so that really helped me. So I started teaching. So I was teaching on their education team, which gave me a little bit of cachet to start teaching. Then I started teaching for other people, because I really am a wool and silk specialist. And so also very active at that time, Maggie Backman. I have to mention Maggie. She was great. She's in her 90s. She's still going strong. I know she runs the assisted living facility where she is, because Maggie is indomitable. But Maggie actually had, not only did she was a longtime vendor at Sew Expo in Puyallup, and so she had booths there and classes there. So I started teaching for her there. And more importantly, I started teaching for Maggie at the Houston International Quilt Festival.
Okay.
And so where she had her own classroom, her own silk classroom back in those days. And so I started teaching, because I do have a background in textile science, so I started teaching silk classes for her, doing silk dyeing, and then eventually I was able to get into the machine classrooms, and my Sewing with Silk class sold out for, God, years. And that was just, it was a great run. And so anyway, so through that, also during this time, I was also going down to Portland to train with Patty Palmer. I promise this will all come to a point. So I was also going down to Portland, and I was training in fit with Patty Palmer and Marta Alto. And because I'd met them both, of course, modeling for them at the style show. So they'd all become my mentors. And so I ended up also filming a class called Will This Fabric Work, which is still out on DVD, with Patty Palmer. So we filmed that, at her place down in Portland. And so right around that same time, so I was teaching at Houston that year, and I was down, I think I was there early. So I think it was during what they call market. So at Houston, there's a wholesale show and then there's a retail show. So wholesale show is the weekend before the retail show. Any rate, so I think I must have started teaching on Monday or something because I was there early. But anyhow, the point is that I went down into the FOF booth, and having been a long time, FOF girl, and Viking too. I mean, here's the funny thing is I work for SVP, and SVP Worldwide stands for Singer, Husqvarna Viking, and FOF. Those are the three brands of machines I've always sewn on my whole life. So it's kind of appropriate, because I had a Viking sewing machine for a long time. And of course, my first sewing machine I ever sewed on was a Singer, like most people, an old Singer. Mm-hmm. So, and then of course, when I became older, I started buying FOFs for myself. And so I went down to the FOF booth and I said, hey, look, other brands have basically their brand ambassadors, they call them now. They didn't call them that back then. But I said, what is it, why don't you have the same thing for FOF? And they were like, well, tell you what, actually we're hiring right now. So why don't you come and, I think about such and such a time this will work. Why don't you, come back down and talk to her? I'll tell her that you're waiting. So I ran upstairs, grabbed my brand spanking new DVD, that I'd done with Patty Palmer, and, grabbed a few other, items to prove my street cred, and came down and interviewed. And sure enough, that was 12 years ago. And so was hired then to also represent FOF as a national educator and go on the road for them. And during this time, I was doing a lot of magazine work, tons of magazine work. And that's probably my biggest body of work, actually. I think I want to say maybe about 65 articles for the various publications. I need to go back and actually count. It's been a while since I bothered adding it up. Yeah, Threads. I had a column in Threads, and tons of, pretty much every issue for a while of Creative Machine Embroidery. Sew It All. There used to be a magazine called Stitch. I used to design for Stitch. I do have had a quilt in love of quilting. I can now honestly say, that now. I've been in a quilting magazine. Yeah, was it last year? I think it was last year. So that's a lot of my work was in publishing. So thankfully, I had a lot of that kind of stuff to bring down. So that's how I became an educator for FOF. 12 years ago. So that was, and so a lot of it too is just, again, through my publishing work. So I also have a good relationship with Sulky, because Ellen March, I worked for her for years as one of her designers and authors for all the different magazines that she was editor of, because she was editor of Sew News and Creative Machine Embroidery and all of those that I wrote for all the time for years. And so then when she went to Sulky, then I kind of, trotted along after her and started doing things for Sulky. So, it's like,
she also have a TV show on PBS?
Yeah, I've been on Sew It. Yeah, it was called Sew It All. Yeah, and so I've been on Sew It All. I'd been on Sew It All with her, a few times too.
See, I've seen you. I've
to represent
you
FOF
everywhere.
Yeah,
I've seen you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So I represented FOF for Sew It All. And then actually my gig for did a couple episodes of Love of Quilting for FOF too. And it's gone both ways too. So I also have serger, like master serger and master machine embroidery classes I've filmed for. Now it's Golden Peak Media, but basically So News and all those people. I've got filmed a bunch of stuff for them. And so a lot of times if I'm filming for other people, I bring Faf along as, I need a machine anyway. So, we have this like nice symbiotic relationship where,
That's good.
Yeah, we all support each other. Well, yeah, and
That's great,
and just like now I'm Clover Tool School instructor. Well, I actually first started talking to them about that like 8 years ago. I actually went back and looked through my emails. So like 8 years ago, I started talking to Clover like, hey, do you want me to do some videos for you? They had a great tool school instructor. He did it for years and years and years. And she was great. And so it's not like, so I didn't really do anything because, it's like they already had a great instructor. But then a year or two ago, he left the company and I was at VDTA, SDTA, which is a big industry. It's an industry wholesale show. So it's not, the general public isn't there. But anyway, so just got to chatting with, the folks at Clover and they were looking for an instructor. So here I am. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah,
I love Clover tools too.
Right? Absolutely.
Their seam rippers are the best.
They are the best. When you're a cross crafter, that's the thing. They've got great knitting needles. They've got great sewing tools. So
yes.
So that's, it's been a great fit. And the folks at Clover are just such nice people. So it's kind of a crazy life in that sometimes I feel like a race car driver. Like I should be sitting here with like all the patches of my various sponsorships, but it's really just all about people. It's really just all about, fostering, just like anything else, be nice to people, foster those relationships. It's kind of, how can I, instead of, trying to be all for you, but it's like, how can I help you? Like, I think you have great stuff. How can I help you? I have a great relationship with Reliable. All my pressing equipment is Reliable, and most of which I've bought myself. But, I'm more than happy to promote them because they have great stuff. And again, they're nice people, so it just, you develop these relationships over the years.
Oh, good.
And it all just kind of, as long as and you have to perform. You still have to meet your deadlines. You have to perform. You can't just talk. But,
right. But I think, like you said, with the people, but also what I notice and what I actually, as a consumer, go for myself is not to be told, you need this or you should do it this way or, any of that hard sell stuff either. And so like when I saw you at the booth, you weren't even trying to sell me the machine. And it ended up I was asking you all the questions of like, well, how does that work? And how does this go? And it was just one like blow my mind after the other, which is how I think, you're going to get the most loyal consumer base and just being genuine and real, because that's what anybody and everybody really just wants. They want that people connection and they don't want to be a number. They don't want to be a sales number. You know what I mean?
So I hate that. I do work a few quilt shows and things, working as you met me, like in the booth for the company. And I'm always laughing to myself because I don't consider myself, I think I'm an adequate salesperson, but I don't think but I think of myself as a matchmaker because for me, my sewing machine is like my most treasured object. We live in fire country, so you always think about, what you're going to throw in the car, if you have to evacuate. And my sewing machine is pretty much at the top of the list. So, the pictures are all backed up on the cloud somewhere, it's like, but my sewing machine. Right. So, to rebuild my wardrobe, after the devastation. But it's like, that's what it's really all about is, and I don't care what brand people sew on. It's like cars, everyone likes their flavor. You don't try to tell someone that, they should sew on a different brand. It's like, if that's what they like, that's what they like, let them have it. It's like, it's everybody makes a good one, just because, this person, it's like, otherwise it's like, it's like an argument between teenage boys and like who makes the best pickups, it's like, it's just, there's no point in going there, it just, whatever you sew on, whatever you sew on, that's great. I happen to be a FOF girl. That's okay. That doesn't mean that I don't also work with Viking because I think they're great too. It's like, I have no issue with that. But But yeah, so but
Right.
it is nice when you have the fun toys. And that's what
Isn't
what we
it?
talked
Yeah.
about earlier is when we met at Expo, or not Expo, sorry, H&H. It all blends together after a while.
H&H.
Poor Stephanie. It all blends together
I'm
after
sure.
a while. But I was using what's called an creative, it's like CEA, creative embellishment attachment. And basically, it kind of
okay.
looks like a UFO, right? Wouldn't you say, Stephanie? It kind of looks like
Yes.
a UFO.
Uh-huh.
So this device,
Yeah.
this special device, which I'm proud to say only Husqvarna Viking and FOF have this, allows you to actually embroider with beads, yarn, and ribbon. So I was running it at H&H with just ribbon. And well, all brands kind of have what's called a couching foot, which allows you to run like ribbon or yarn or whatever through the foot. The difference,
cord, yeah.
The difference here is that the creative embellishment attachment, it actually positions the ribbon or beads or yarn as you stitch so that it's flawless for one thing, but it almost creates, would you say it almost looks like paper quilling, doesn't it? Like just the way it stitches the ribbon.
Yes. It creates the dimension.
Yeah.
With the,
it's not just flat. And
you don't see the stitching.
Yeah, you don't.
That was
exactly.
the other thing. It hid the stitches.
Yeah, exactly.
So it looks like it's floating.
It does. Oh, it totally does. It totally does.
Yeah.
And it's just a running stitch. So I've actually used that to stitch ribbon. So one of the things I'll do for FOF, and sometimes Viking too, actually I just did Viking convention last year, is they'll commission me to do, say, gowns for upcoming, like when they release a new top-line machine, there's usually garments and quilts that represent the new machine. And so oftentimes I'm one of the people who makes those garments to show off the new machine. And so Stephanie got to see that in the H&H booth because most of the garments, if not all the garments I think in the booth were actually my work. So just as it happened.
Yeah.
But anyhow, the point is, there was a gown that wasn't there that had the theme. So when they launch a brand new machine, sometimes it'll come out in limited edition colors, and they only make a few of those, and they have a special plaque and all that stuff. And anyway, so this last Viking that was launched, one of the colors was winter white. So I was commissioned to do a gown. Oh, no, that was the FOF. Sorry, it was FOF. It was the previous FOF convention. But anyway, the point is winter white. So how do you make a white gown that doesn't look like a wedding dress, right? It's kind of hard, but
yeah.
But anyway, so I made a ball gown, and the skirt had like 5 layers of tulle. But what I did was because we had pretty big embroidery hoops, I had great big snowflakes. So there were these big ribbon snowflake designs. And actually there was like maybe 3 different sizes. So what I did was I took the ribbon embroidery and interspersed all of these different snowflakes, sizes, different types of ribbon, and all those, and just kind of sprinkled them or interspersed them through all those different layers of tulle. So, so the girl was basically a walking snowfall in a sense with these obviously gigantic, snowflakes. But at least it kind of helped it keep from...
Sounds beautiful.
It helped to keep it from looking like, total wedding dress time, So, it was definitely wintry, So, but anyway, the point is that what's really cool about that ribbon embroidery is that it's just a running stitch. So like all those layers of tulle, and I definitely kind of held my breath the first one, but all those different layers of tulle, I didn't even have to use stabilizer. I just very carefully, no, I didn't. I very carefully hooped the tulle to try to keep it from, because tearing the tulle was the big problem. But because it's just a simple running stitch, it just tacks the ribbon down. So it's not like when you have fill stitches.
Yeah.
Because when you have fill stitches, that's when you need stabilizer. If it's just a straight running stitch, you don't. Because there's no compensation issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was what one of the things I love about it is that you can I can honestly say, because I have a dress to prove it, that you can embroider even on tulle without stabilizer to put that ribbon on there. So it's cool stuff. It's really fun.
Creative
with the
attachment.
The creative embellishment. I have to stop and think what it's called.
I like a CEA.
Right, exactly, the CEA. But yeah, so that's really probably the most selfish reason why I work for the sewing machine companies, is so that I get the latest and greatest toys. You know, when the new
I'm sure
new machine comes out here,
that's a very nice perk.
The consumers get it first, I will say. So they're really good about, consumers actually get it before we do. Like sometimes I'll get shipped a demo machine, like a pre-release, so that I can, if there's a technique that only that machine will do, so I can make the sample garment, but I usually have to give it right back. So they're really good. But once the consumers get theirs, then usually for the educators, then we get our loaner machine. I mean, we do have to give it back eventually, but we just get a loaner. Yeah, and a lot of times they're machines that say they've used to train service people on. So, it may have been taken apart and put back together again, but I don't care. It's a perfectly good machine.
Still, I wouldn't complain.
No
complaints right here.
No, exactly. No, I'm so spoiled. I am so spoiled.
And it's so cool. It's like always having like the latest and greatest with like a leased car.
Totally.
But you're getting the latest and greatest of the sewing machine.
Oh yeah.
That you kind of might look forward to handing it back in, because now you're going to get this, new.
Well, exactly. You do.
One of a kind piece of technology that's out on the machine. I mean, at one point I thought, how could they even improve on this? I've got like the hover presser foot and the pivot and all this stuff, and then I see you.
Yeah. No, well, that's
with the floating ribbon.
Well, we think the same thing. We think the same thing.
It can always get better,
right? We think the same thing. I know when people get mad at us, sometimes they get mad like, I just bought. I'm just like, well, sorry, it's just like your car. There's features on your car now that you didn't have in 1985 too. It's like, sorry, like. Well, I mean, companies.
That is kind of the
companies. I mean, that's how they stay in business. If they built one ultimate machine, boom, everybody buy it, then you're done. You're out of business. So it's just like, I mean, I just tell people it's just like cars or anything else. Number one, technology is always changing. It's always improving. There's always things that we could do better. The latest, the FOF Icon 2, for example, has an entirely new set of decorative stitches that look like really big hand stitching. They're super beautiful. And I was really surprised that after all these years, they're still bothering to come out with new decorative stitches, and those are sewing stitches. They're not embroidery stitches. So it's like, even that kind of stuff, the engineers are still like, okay, what other pretty things can we stick on this machine? So, and now the machines have, cameras and projectors to make it easier to position your embroidery.
They do.
And all these different things that they all have, and they borrow from each
laser,
other. Yeah, exactly. So it's all good.
Yeah.
As a middle-aged woman whose eyes aren't getting any better, I appreciate a lot of these tools.
You're talking,
right?
That's what these are for,
right? Exactly. I know. It's like it's the usual like, where's my reading glasses? Yes, but you never thought you'd get there in life, but there you are.
So. I know. Wait, let's digress for a second. So when I was first told that I would need to wear reading glasses, I was 45, and then
that's the age.
I was like, are there any like eye exercisers or something that make my eyes stronger so I won't need this shit? She laughed at me.
Exactly.
She said,
dream on, honey.
She goes, no, there is no escaping this.
Yeah.
This happens to everyone.
Yeah.
And she's like, and you're lucky because it usually starts at 40. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, I think I actually, and I've been nearsighted my whole life. So it was like, are you kidding me? Like, I've needed glasses since I was like 6 years old. Like, really? Like, this sucks.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like some terrible cosmic joke. But when we get cataracts, Stephanie, when we get cataracts, they'll fix our eyes, and we just have to choose whether to be long-sighted or nearsighted again.
They will. Yes, I know. I had that conversation this year because TMI. Okay, I may edit this out, but really quickly. So with this whole reading plus the astigmatism contacts, I've been struggling with my contact lens prescription, in addition to dry eye, which also makes things blurry, which I had no idea. So I thought, oh my God, my prescription changed again. He goes, you're the same. try this eye drop.
Oh no.
Just made things clearer.
Well, okay, so
that's a whole other thing too.
Another thing to think. So here's another option. So I won't. It's not perfect, but I actually wear. So I also have astigmatism in the whole bit. You know, lucky us. I actually wear hard lenses that you sleep in. They're like braces for your eyes. So I
tried the hards too.
Well, these you sleep in.
Let me tell you, I tried everything.
Yeah.
I didn't know about. I don't think I tried those.
Yeah, these you sleep
I tried
in.
the hard for
Yeah, hards are awful because they're just awful if you have your eyes open for any real length of time. But these, like I said, you sleep in them.
One little hair,
right?
Would like
any particle of dust. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yes. But like I said, these you sleep in.
Well, that's interesting.
And then I don't have anything right now. So I'm now farsighted. Because they basically...
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because they fixed my distance vision, but now I have to wear reading glasses. So I forgot to wear them one night, and the next day, when it kind of wore off, I actually was nearsighted again. I'm like, hey, I don't need reading glasses, but I can't see anything else, you know? So you still have to make that choice, even if you have... But I guess with kids that are nearsighted, have vision issues, if they start young enough, like they only have to wear them like maybe a couple times a week to retain the benefits. I know. I wish I'd known about that.
And like
back
you
in
said,
the day.
it's like braces for your eyes because it reshapes the. Okay,
it literally
I see what you're saying.
They use the same measurement stuff that they do for LASIK. So my optometrist, he does LASIK and all that kind of stuff. But so they use the same measurement tools to create the lens, and it just reshapes your eyeball. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's very important for us who sew and have to do intricate things with eye-hand coordination.
Oh, it's terrible.
So, you don't really know how valuable your vision is until you start having.
Well, and then you have people like us too who have to work on a computer, and we're editing film, editing video, and all this stuff. It's just it's endless.
Yeah, I know. It is endless. Technology is going to kill us all. But then it could also save us with like the inventions you're talking about. Okay, I'm going to veer us back to the sewing. Sergers, you are also like completely proficient beyond in as well. And you talked about, you mentioned Linda Lee, and that's who I actually learned about I took some of her clothing classes, and then she really got me excited about getting the serger because of all the stuff that she did on the clothing that wasn't just construction related.
Right.
It was more like decorative too. So, but I wanted to ask you if there was like one thing that you would want your students to take away about using their sergers, what would it be? Because a lot of people are afraid. I was afraid until now I can't live without it. I mean, now it's just like, don't even try to like have me not have a serger.
Right. Well, I think number one, of course, would be just don't be afraid. But number two would be, use your serger however you see fit. I mean, sometimes I think people, they think of like, it's like they have to make a choice between their serger and their sewing machine. Honestly, it's funny to me that, I now have a serger book and all this. It's not that I'm not, extremely proficient on a serger. I am, and I'm very comfortable teaching other people how to use sergers, but I really am more of a sewing machine person. So even though, I do some of the fancy stuff with a serger, and I do, use it for that. But honestly, a lot of time my serger is just doing the most boring, basic stuff. It's finishing seam allowances. It's, it's doing a lot of times, I'll sew my garment, but I'll serge the lining, just to make it faster. Or, it's kind of funny because I do
that's a good idea.
a lot of tailored things. Okay. Yeah. There's no reason to have fancy seams or, you're just popping that lining together.
Yeah. That are going to be hidden.
Yeah.
Right.
And you've already done all your fit adjustments to the garment itself. So you should know what to do to the lining to make it work. But that's just it. I do a lot of tailored garments. So I don't like to necessarily serge the seams themselves because, once you serge that, you've lost your ability to do much fit alterations. Unless you're making it smaller, you're kind of stuck. So I'm a big believer in, full-size seam allowances in garment projects, except for, like I said, but when I get to the lining, I've already worked all that out. And so I have no issue. But also even if I serge my seams, I'm one of those people that I will actually, and I know this seems counterproductive or way too much work for a lot of people, but I will actually baste the seam on my sewing machine first. Just again, so I can double check the fit. And there's certain areas like putting a sleeve in, when you're inserting a sleeve on a serger, even if you're just doing the cap, where you do the method where you just put the cap in and then you serge the underarm seam and the side seam in one shot. If you're going to accidentally slice your garment with your serger cutting blade, it's going to be when you put the stupid sleeve in. So oftentimes I will just go ahead and frankly baste that thing in with my sewing machine, double check that everything looks good, double check that everything fits, and then I'll serge it. Because I'm not serging the seam. Oh. I'm not serging the seam to make it fast, to necessarily do fast construction. Right. I'm a lot more concerned about the quality of the end product than I am with how fast I cranked it out. It's not a race. I'm not going to win any points or get some kind of pay bonus for, getting it done faster, other than obviously the satisfaction of getting it off my work table. But, I get paid for things to look good. So, and it needs to fit. If I'm going to wear it, it has to look good when I'm wearing it, or else all my street cred is gone. So, because I am my best marketing. And so,
you are.
So again, a lot of times, use your serger however you see fit. I think I'm one of those people that I actually lift my serger presser foot when I put my fabric in. There's some people that almost take it like, oh no, I do. They always put the fabric up to the foot and let the serger pull it in. Well, it's easy for the layers to shift when you do it that way. Yes, you can do it that way. Fine. If you like it, do it that way. Go for it. I don't care. But I choose to do it the other way for my own reasons, And so I just think,
that's a good tip.
Remember that your serger is your sewing machine's best friend. They are not enemies. They are not at odds. They're like peanut butter and jelly. They go together. They're besties, and it's all good. I just think that it's funny how people have these weird relationships with sergers, or, now that I have my serger, I'm only going to put zippers in with my serger, or, whatever it is, it's like, fine, whatever, if it makes you happy, I say go for it. I'm all about sewing happiness. That's what I'm about. I don't, whether it's a serger or sewing machine.
I like that. Yeah.
Just make yourself happy.
Exactly. So basically, no fear, and make yourself happy and use it how you want to use it.
Yeah, it's great. Your machine, by golly. You paid for it. You can do whatever you want with it. If all you do is, if the only thing you use it for is to serge around the edge of old ratty towels to make washcloths, then by golly, you know what? It's your machine. So,
oh, it's too funny. So, also, okay, let's see. There really quickly too, I saw you had a class for decorative embroidery on denim, which I think was probably, I don't know if it is, but it sounds like that could be a really popular class or topic for you.
Yeah, it's done well for Craftsy. Yeah. Because denim, embroidering denim is one of those things that's like, I think it's a lot like machine embroidery in general, in the sense that it's easy to do, but it's hard to do well. Because people, yes, machine embroidery is, push a button and it stitches, right? And that's kind of how everyone looks at it. But yes, but, it's like, or even driving a car. Yes, it's easy to drive a car, but it's not necessarily as easy to do it well, So it's, so embroidering denim. So here's the big secret. So the secret to embroidering denim is that you want to treat it like it's a knit fabric. Because denim has a very loose, the way denim is spun, number one, obviously it's made out of cotton. So cotton, not the world's most stable fiber anyway. It tends to have short staples. It's kind of a soft, squishy, not real smooth and, regular kind of yarn to begin with. Ring spun is better, but, anyway, we won't get into all the technical textile stuff on that. But the point is that here you have a soft, thick yarn that's somewhat loosely woven into a twill, and a twill weave structure has more movement in it than a plain woven structure does. this is all good things for wearing denim because it does have, even though it's a stiff, heavy fabric for the most part, it does have some give to it. You know, your jeans always fit looser at the end of the day than they did at the beginning of the day. Well, some of the things that, make denim great to wear don't necessarily make it great to embroider. And the biggest problem is that it's really easy to get a lot of distortion. So you get what looks like big, like water ripples around the outside of your embroidery designs and things. And that's basically, it is like water ripples because it's displacement. So what happens is when you start putting all those embroidery threads in there, it's literally like a drop of water displacing the water that's already in the cup. And so that's what those ripples are. It's the weave structure making room for the yarns that you've added in other words, the embroidery thread. So the way that you counterbalance that, number one, you've got to make sure you use enough stabilizer. Number two, big one is you starch your fabric. So the secret to embroidering denim really well is to starch the heck out of it before you stitch. So, I mean, usually I'll open up, like if I'm doing the denim, I like to embroider my jeans. I embroider a lot of my jeans and I embroider them from the ankle, most of the way up my leg, which is a lot because I'm 5'10". So I open up it's usually the inside, whichever seam isn't a flat fill, usually the inside leg seam for some reason. Anyway, whatever seam isn't flat fill, I open that one up. And then I literally will take, sometimes I use my good starch, but for jeans, a lot of times I'll just use Niagara heavy duty from the grocery store. And I just hose it down. Yeah. I just absolutely soak it in starch and let it dry. And even then, oftentimes my first layer of stabilizer will be a sticky stabilizer. So I'll use like a sticky wash away stabilizer to stick that into the hoop to, again, the whole,
I love those.
The whole, And if you don't have wash away sticky, because that is the most expensive stabilizer out there, there's other things you can use. You can even use a glue stick, and you can use glue stick to stick your denim down to your hoop. But the point is that, and then I'll even do a basting stitch around it. The point is that what you're struggling with denim is you want to keep that weave structure from moving. And that's why you starch it, you stick it down, you do everything in your power to keep it from shifting around, and then you'll get nice looking embroidery. So, I mean, that was kind of, in a nutshell,
wonderful.
What that, I mean, there's obviously a little bit more to it, but that's in a nutshell what that 3-hour class is about.
Yeah, but see, interesting. That's great because, it made me think about something else too, that a lot of times people get frustrated with their machines, let's say on something like that, thinking that it's the machine and, or maybe, that it's them, that they can't do it or whatever and lose confidence. But it's really just like knowing how to treat, the fibers and how to stabilize it and and then your machine will work properly.
Exactly. 99% of the time it's your needle.
Yeah.
The other 1% of the time, it could be the textile.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's, as a sewing educator, there's times I just want to go beat my head against the wall because I find that a lot of sewists they'll be fixated on whether the stitch is perfectly balanced and just like, is it strong? Is it holding everything together? Okay. I'm all for beautiful stitching. Don't get me wrong. But, let's focus on some more important things. Like, and like, it's hard for some people to understand that, like with machine embroidery is not supposed to be a balanced stitch. You're supposed to see needle thread on the backside of the fabric. That is correct tension for machine embroidery. And that drives some people absolutely. They think it all should be, perfectly, balanced. No, it's not supposed to be. That's not how it's supposed to be. So it's kind of funny, but
right, and
it's the needle. Change your needle
and thread.
Yeah, and buy good thread.
There you go.
Is 20 here? I'll have people with a $15,000 machine, and they don't want to buy a $1 needle. And they're using the cheapest, crummiest thread that's 40 years old. It's got dry rot, because believe it or not, thread can dry rot. Well, it doesn't. My free motion embroidery. Free motion drives me crazy. The free motion isn't. It isn't perfect, and I'll watch them do it. And there's no nice way to say, well, you're doing it wrong. It's like free motion is very hard. Free motion is really hard because you have to move the speed at which you move the fabric has to be appropriate to the speed at which the machine is sewing.
Yeah.
You know, if you're breaking needles, bending needles, if your repair person says that you're dinging your bobbin case, you're doing it wrong. Sorry. You know, it's like, I mean, and I understand it's hard. It takes practice. I get it. You know, I'm not saying that you should feel bad about that. It just means you need more practice. There's nothing wrong with you. You're fine. Just practice more.
Right. Exactly. And don't listen to like 500 people in a forum, because they're all going to tell you something different. And
yeah,
I mean, for me, and I even, like, before I really knew and understood machines like I do now, I would think, oh, this machine, you know, it's just not working right, and this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. Well, now I know, like, you know, you have to clean the lint out every time, you know, for me at least, after every time I use it. I mean, the little brush comes out, and, you know, little threads do get caught in the bobbins and stuff like that. So, I mean, along with, like, you know, maintaining, and then another popular saying is that, oh, this machine does not like this and doesn't do like that.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't like this thread, or doesn't like this fabric. And it's just that,
change your needle.
it's not the machine per se. Unless there's something that really is wrong with it, but it's the appropriate needle, the appropriate tension, and learning textiles. Because, like, you know, I would even, like, originally think that, oh, denim is so strong, it's so thick, it wouldn't need stabilizer.
Right, you would think.
But now that you just described the twill nature of it, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's not a stable fabric.
Yeah, so treat it like a knit.
Yep.
It's so simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you just think of it like that.
Yeah, that's great. So wonderful. It's so good that you are, and that's the other thing too. These companies do need national educators like that, the people who actually do know these things, and that you can teach them so that people can love their machines.
Absolutely.
And enjoy them.
Yeah.
And create beautiful things.
Well, again, the whole goal.
I'm so glad that I met you.
Yeah, the whole goal is for you to enjoy yourself. The whole goal is for you to love what you make, and, you know, hopefully love your machine too, obviously. But, you know, it's, that's the goal. You should be happy. We want you to be happy.
Yeah. And don't think you can't do it, because you can.
Yeah, of course you can.
You can do it. Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
It just might be just one little tiny thing.
Oh, yeah.
That changes the whole game for you. So
no one should ever think.
I love that.
Right. Well, no one should ever think that because someone's a sewing professional that we don't make mistakes. Are you kidding me? I mean, I'm fond of telling my students, like, I'm a professional because I make bigger mistakes faster than you do, you know, because that's why I learn so much, because I make a lot. I mean, sometimes, and half the time it's really stupid mistakes, because I'm thinking about something. I'm not even paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm thinking about something totally different. You know, I'm designing whatever project I have coming up when I should be focused on the seam I'm stitching, right? So, you know, don't ever think, I really, it saddens me when people, if they make a mistake, they think they're not good at it. It's like, oh, holy cow, you know, if I quit because I made a mistake, I never would have got started. You know, it's like, I make dumb mistakes all the time. And it's like, I hope that doesn't actually discourage people. But I mean, I do actually manage to make beautiful things pretty regularly, but it certainly does not mean no mistakes. It just means learning from your mistakes and accepting that, you know, you're human, and that it just happens. It happens.
Right.
And most of the time, you're the only person who's even going to notice.
Yes.
You're the only one.
Your eyes are too close to what you're making a lot of the times. I've even, you know, I have to tell myself that, because then sometimes I start getting like, why is this happening?
We have the urge to like run up to everyone and say,
I am mere inches away from this.
Right? When you have the urge to like run up to everyone and go, they say, oh, that looks beautiful. And you want to say, oh, but look at this mistake I made. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, why do we do that to ourselves? Like, no one will notice. Like, okay, like that, my
it's
jacket.
very hard to do, but.
Yep. Well, like the wool, the jacket that won the wool contest, that strip of seminal piecing, I had cut those strips so that there would be a diamond point perfectly positioned, of course, right at the cap of my sleeve, right? Perfectly. On one of them, I put it in upside down. And then I went ahead and what people don't realize about a lot of commercial jackets is that they're fully interfaced with fusible interfacing. And they do this before the fabric's even cut. So you may not realize it, but that whole jacket is interfaced. any rate, the point is I had gone ahead and interfaced the upper sleeve before I realized what I'd done. So if you actually knew what you were looking for, one of those strips is upside down. And I did cry. I did cry over that.
That's interesting.
Because I had no more fabric. I literally had no fabric. So I couldn't.
But you won.
And I won the national contest. No one ever said, oh, did you ever notice that your strip is upside down on one of them? I mean, it's like, so that's the point. Like, if you don't point it out,
yes,
nobody's looking at both sleeve caps at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
So, you know.
And honestly, if people are looking for things to pick at, they're
not your friends.
Exactly. They need to find another.
They need a new hobby, and they are not your friends.
Yes. So, speaking of hobbies, one last thing before I let you go, because I know you're super busy. I wanted to ask you, because you do this for a living, like you're the sewing and everything. So, do you sew for yourself personally things that are just for you that you enjoy to do, keeping it sort of like a hobby for yourself? Or are there other creative things that you do just for yourself as a hobby?
Oh my goodness. Well, the answer to the first part of that
creative
is
juices flowing.
Yeah, the first part is definitely yes. In fact, my biggest frustration is that I almost never have time to sew for myself. And then if I do,
that's what I'm wondering.
If I do, it pretty much has to be related to a class I'm teaching or something, because I just, there has to be a excuse for it. Or like SVP came out with a new, they worked with Ditto to launch this new Ditto pattern system. And so then it was great because I had the excuse, because I wasn't their official educator, but I was one of only a very small handful of educators who could basically teach it and demo it. So I have my own like little Ditto wardrobe that I had an excuse to sew for myself because I got to promote that. So it's always,
cool.
You know, to be honest, I'm looking forward to retirement because I have so much fabric. I can't wait to actually work my way through it. So so actually given my druthers, I actually do sew. I mean, it's like if I have some spare time, because again, I'm a clothes horse. And when I'm working out in public, when I'm teaching at a show or something, I'm usually wearing what I've made. And it's because I feel like you need to walk the walk. You know, if you're saying that, I like to make garments and I'm a fit instructor, all this, and what you're wearing came from Walmart, to me, that's just like, where's your credibility? You know, I mean, if you see me most of the time, I'm not saying always, but most of the time, you know, I've made that jacket. I've probably made the slacks, not always, but probably made the slacks, you know, whatever. I think it's really important.
You were wearing this gorgeous bustier beaded.
Oh yeah.
And was that denim?
Yes, it was. Yes, that was from I made that to wear on camera for that craftsy class. Yes. So yeah. Right? So there you go. I mean, but again, it's like,
oh, it's beautiful.
You got to walk the walk. But actually, I never thought I would be a sewing professional because I'm not fast. I'm much more of a detail-oriented person. Although I have to take that back. Now that I've actually seen other people sew in public, I'm actually a lot faster than most people. But I didn't feel that I was fast enough to make a living at it. I didn't really think about the whole education side of things. I was thinking more custom clothing. Glad I didn't go the custom clothing route. Doing things for marketing, you know, for marketing campaigns, that's okay, because it's the model's problem. She has to get into it. But I'm glad I didn't do custom clothing. But yes, I do. Well, I have my sheep, so I can be across the country. I swear, my sheep are more famous than me, because I'll be somewhere, you know, demonstrating a machine, and someone will pipe up from the back row, and she has sheep. Like, sheep are just fascinating people. So I actually do grow.
They are. I love sheep.
Right? Everybody loves sheep. I mean, I love my sheep. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
me too.
I was actually in my fleece barn. So right now, I actually have. Oh, the sheep. I actually have a yarn line.
Little sheepy.
Oh, I love it. Was it that one of those, the measuring tape?
Lantern moon.
Is it one of the measuring tape sheep?
No.
Oh, it's just a sheep.
Just a pin.
Oh, okay.
But it's
adorable.
It's just a sheep.
It's adorable.
It's a pin. I could actually wear it.
Oh, it's awesome. I have a sheep measure.
Yeah, I love sheep.
I have a sheep measuring tape. Like, they pull on the tail, and that's the.
I've seen those.
Yeah, I have one of those.
Oh, that's so cute.
But yeah, so So
Aw.
I actually have a yarn line, and it's actually going to be debuting again soon. It was being sold through local Paradise Fibers, but a friend of mine is launching an very exclusive yarn company called Bougie Knits. Well, it doesn't get much more bougie than my yarn, because all of my yarn is produced by the sheep. So it's like when you buy a bottle of wine and it has, the where it was grown and the year and all that. So all of my yarn has the sheep's name on it. It has that shearing number on it. It has, all of their information. So you can go online and you can actually see pictures of the sheep that you're knitting or crocheting or weaving or whatever. And so
I love that.
Oh, I love it. Well, and what's kind of cool about it is, so right now, so I just shipped all the yarn down to California to her. And so she's going to put it online, but she's also going to be showing it at a lot of shows and selling it in person at shows. So I'll actually be in the booth at Houston this year, representing as the shepherdess, representing the yarn on preview night. So if you're at the Houston International Quilt Festival, come to preview night, and you can meet me in the booth with my yarn. But anyhow,
Nice.
So last night, so I'm getting ready to send a new batch to the processor, because we need more inventory in the future, and it takes months to get it done. So I was actually skirting a fleece from one of my absolute favorite sheep, Thor. From 2017, and I lost Thor to pneumonia caused by forest fire smoke and dust. He was respiratory compromised. Yeah, it was super hot and dry. We had, the smoke, there's been times when the smoke here has been so bad that you can't even see across the road. You can't see across the yard. It's just terrifying sometimes, because if you have a fire start on your property, you can't even see it. So think about that. You could have a fire start and you don't even know it's there. So
you can't even see it.
Yeah, it's terrifying when the smoke is bad. Not just that it's like basically the equivalent of smoking a pack a day, but it's also quite terrifying. But at any rate, I really was choked up preparing this fleece for processing, picking out so what I have to do as shepherdess is every single fleece. So every yarn I sell, I have literally had my hands on all of that fiber before it goes to the processor, because I have to hand pick out any vegetation or poopy bits or anything. Sheep are dirty little buggers. So anything that isn't nice, I have to pick out before I send it to the processor. Okay. So it usually takes at least an hour per fleece. It's very labor intensive. Oh, wow. But anyway, so here I was, picking through, it's called skirting. So I was skirting Thor's last fleece, and it really choked me up, because it's like, I miss him so much. And, but it's really producing the yarn. It's certainly, I'd starve to death if I was relying on that for my income. But it buys dog food for the guardian. We have guard dog, dogs that protect the flock, and it pays for their dog food. Nice. And the sheep basically support themselves. Nice. That's about all it does. They support themselves. And
hey, that's good.
Right. And so, but it makes it's really meaningful. I have to basically donate my labor, but it's meaningful that the sheep, they reach people all over the world. The sheep are like out there, even after they've passed from old age, they're still out there keeping people warm, and they're still out there making people smile as they knit and crochet with it. So that's super meaningful to me, that, my sheep just, they're out there in the world and they're being loved, even when they're long gone. So that's, I'm going to keep doing it, as long as people keep buying the yarn. I'll keep doing it just because it's meaningful, and it's, I love my sheep.
So we can find the barn through Bougie Knits.
It's going to be called Bougie Knits. So when this podcast comes out, chances are the website will be up. So if they just do a search under Bougie Knits, or you can go to, I'll have a link to it on Spoiled Sheep Yarn. So if you go to spoiledsheep.com.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Spoiled Sheep, just type in Spoiled Sheep. You should come to spoiledsheep.com. And you can read all of the biographies of all my sheep and see pictures of our guard dogs and all that good stuff. I've got to update it because we have a new guard dog.
I'm a huge animal lover. I love dogs.
Oh my God. You have to come visit, Stephanie.
I do want to.
You
Oh
have
my
to come
gosh. That's
visit.
one place too. I keep telling my husband, I'm like, we need to go to the Pacific Northwest.
Oh my God,
because
yes.
It's, I love the furthest north that we got was like Eureka, which is right before Oregon, and that redwood forest, I just died. But I still need to keep going north.
Keep going north. Well, Washington State, just to brag,
to Washington.
Yeah, just to brag on our state. Washington is the only state that has, as far as I know, that has temperate, not tropical, but temperate rainforest and desert in the same state.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
And we have 3 mountain ranges. Or wait, no, we have 4 mountain ranges. We have the Olympics, the Cascades, the Blues, and the Selkirks. So we have 4 mountain ranges.
Wow.
we have ocean, we have islands.
Yeah.
We actually had our own war with Britain. It was called the Pig War. We actually were at war with Britain at one point.
Yeah.
So over the San Juan Islands.
I think I have heard of that.
Yep, the Pig War.
Mm-hmm.
So Washington's it's a great
beautiful state.
It really is. It's a great state.
Yeah. It's on my list to visit. But the sheep and the yarn, I love the way that you're doing that, because, and to some, knitters and people who use this yarn for their projects and crochet like to know that. They like to know where the yarn came from. And it's nice to actually put like a
face with your yarn,
melody to it. A face with your yarn. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It has a story. I love anything and everything that has a story too.
Oh, absolutely.
So hence the podcast.
Well, there's exactly. Well, there's so much labor that goes. I mean, it's a lot of labor that just goes into producing the yarn, and it's very expensive to produce it. Mm-hmm. It's a big investment of time and money, but it is meaningful, and it takes a lot of labor to create something, from yarn, whether you're knitting or crocheting or weaving.
Yes.
That's a big, so it should be something that's meaningful. Life is short and precious. Why not work with something with precious materials? I mean, that's kind of my fabric philosophy.
Yeah.
I don't have cheap, crappy fabric. I mean, I might buy some cotton broadcloth to cut up for kits, for teaching classes, but that's certainly not anything I buy for myself. My fabric collection is pretty prime. Because
yours is.
My time is so precious.
I drool over your fabric.
I know. Well, my time is so precious.
True.
Why would I spend it on crappy fabric? It just,
Well, and at this point too, like the people who don't do this for a hobby even don't even know quality from non-quality. Which is a little sad. And then also, I have to just tell you this real quick. I was reading a book and it was talking about the sweater that this girl couldn't afford. And she's like, I mean, really, what is it? Just a bunch of yarn. Why is it this expensive?
She needs to come visit me and she'll find out why.
I know. Oh boy. See, that is what you run into. I mean, even these authors of novels are just like treating yarn like it's,
well, if it's made from plastic
person.
Yeah. I mean, well, if it's, cheap acrylic yarn that, is going to melt.
But just the way she said it was just so condescending.
Yeah.
Like, what? It's just a bunch of yarn.
Yeah. Well, you sit down and knit it, honey. And
like it's not worth.
We'll see how much
valuable.
Well, I mean, but people, people have that attitude towards a lot of, what we, call crafts. I know it's Steffi and I, neither of us really fond of the word craft, but in the way that Americans use it. But it's like, I mean, I know people who do beautiful quilting, they might have it, be showing someone at work and someone was like, I'll give you $75 for that. It's like, okay.
Oh my God.
You start adding up, and this was actually even it was funny in 4-H. I was talking about how, we have the kids, calculate how much is into it. Well, in the old mindset for sewing, the older generation, I mean, not to diss on anyone, but the older generation, I can't tell you how many times like, well, I used to sew, but you just can't save money doing that anymore. And I'm just like, I just always say, I'm not making Walmart clothes. Okay, the kind of clothes that I make would cost you thousands of dollars. So yes, I'm actually kind of more or less saving money doing what I do, because we're not talking Walmart. Yes, it's cheaper just to buy Walmart clothes. If that's what you want to wear and that's what you want to make, fine, knock yourself out. I have no issue with that.
Well, I even think that those generations just took for granted and were just treated so that it was just like,
Well, they sewed because they had
it didn't have
to.
value.
Well, and they sewed because they
Right,
quote
they had to.
But see, back then we actually had a textile industry in the United States. We had clothing manufacturing in the United States. Yes, we still have some that exists, and yes, people are trying to make more of a comeback. But what people have to understand is that now. So there used to be a lot of, it always kind of makes me laugh when, people make a big deal out of advertising the fabric they're selling as designer dead stock. Oh, it's dead stock. It's all dead stock. Okay. Unless you're Joanne, or you work you may work in these days, especially in the quilting world. I'm talking more apparel. In the quilting world, yes, they manufacture fabric just for people to cut up into little pieces and sew it back together again. But in the apparel world, a lot of our textiles, unless you're buying direct from a manufacturer, a lot of textiles are dead stock. They are left over from the manufacturing process wherever. Well, so back in the day, when again we had all of those factories and things in the United States, there was a lot of leftover fabric that would then be sold very cheaply, therefore could be resold cheaply, etc. Well, like I said, our local, kind of general store would have fabric. Walmart used to have fabric. Real fabric, not just, a little bit. So it was, it just was much more readily available, and therefore it was cheaper. So, but it's kind of hard. There was a lady who was really sweet and used to babysit my brother and I when we were little. And I remember her sewing all the time, and she had a bunch of kids. So, but at any rate, I asked her, I saw her at a funeral, because that's where you see people from home. And I said, "Are you still sewing? I have fond memories, as a little girl of you sewing." She says, "Oh no." And that's it. She was like, "Oh no." She says, "You just can't save money doing that anymore." And she says, sometimes fabric is like $7 a yard or something like that. I have fabric that's, I couldn't even tell her how many times more expensive than that in my stash. One of my best friends is a weaver, so, her fabric is like $150 a yard or better, and it should be, because it's hand woven. But the point is I just.
Yeah, the more hand labor to it, the more it should.
But it's like, I didn't laugh. I was so proud of myself. I said, yeah, I understand. But to myself, I'm just thinking, well, but that's the thing. She was sewing for a different reason than I sew. I sew for the personal satisfaction. I sew to create something beautiful that fits, something beautiful that fits me.
I was just going to say, it fits. It's fitted. You can make things fit to you that you will never, ever get with commercial ready-made.
Never. So we sew for different reasons. And so that's why, I would never want to make her feel bad, because everyone's reasons for sewing, whether it's utility or whatever, it's perfectly legitimate. You do you, for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
You do you.
Really, you should just do it for joy, and not that you have to, which is, nice these days that most of us can do it like that.
Well, and even when I really started taking it seriously, I was just gonna say, even when I really started taking it seriously for investment banking, I was kind of doing it out of necessity. But I discovered joy doing it. Not that I always enjoyed it, but you know what I mean? It became more meaningful as I went.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And then, no. But I wanted to mention, I was glad to hear you say that you are detail oriented and you're not fast, because I'm the same way. Like, I can't just pump stuff out really quickly, like, you see on social media having been done.
A dress a day.
And
no.
And I don't feel bad about it at all, because I enjoy what I make, and I know that it's the details there and the fulfillment is there for me, and so it really isn't all about the speed.
No, there's times I wish
the faster you are, you're not. The faster you are does not mean you're better.
No. If that's what gives you, and for some people, it's obvious that that's what gives them satisfaction, is just cranking stuff out, and that's great.
Sure.
If that's what brings them joy, that's wonderful. But again, whatever pleases you. I wish. 99% of the time even if I'm sewing something for myself, there's still a deadline, in the sense that I have other projects backing up while I'm making something for myself. So, it's very frustrating that sometimes my clothes aren't made as well as I wish they were, simply because I don't have the time. I have to use the super fast construction methods. I have to sometimes, use little cheater techniques, so to speak. I have friends who are just horrified, of some of the things that I do because, they were couturier trained and this, that, and the other. But it's like, I have to meet my deadlines or I don't get paid. So whereas they're just sewing for pleasure. So, you're coming from different places and everyone has their own reality, basically.
Yes.
So it's okay.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's okay.
Yeah, and it's better to have something actually tangible finished than just hoping that you will get to it or you start it and because you're spending too much fickle time on it.
And again, quit pointing out your mistakes.
How to do it. Just you know the shortcuts the shortcuts you can take.
Yeah.
And it still looks like $1 million, which is also part of that experience.
Yeah.
So,
and good fabric,
kind of like a cool thing, I think.
Absolutely, pretty fabric. Yeah. Pretty fabric. This is kind of the cheater is really plain fabric requires more detail. Like really plain fabric is when you have to really look a lot harder at your embellishment techniques or your seaming techniques or the architectural details of the garment or whatever it is you're sewing, with plain fabric. Whereas really beautiful fabric, you can sew the most basic, I remember I made a wrap skirt one time in my early 20s. I don't think I'd ever sewn on a waistband before. That's how young I was. And I made this wrap skirt out of this beautiful raw silk, what we call that's the wrong term. But anyway, this beautiful kind of rustic silk. I got more compliments on that little wrap skirt that was just a wrap skirt. Didn't even have the waistband sewn on properly, but you couldn't tell from the outside. But the fabric was beautiful. And so that was a great life lesson I learned very early was that, if you use really beautiful fabric, it makes up for a lot of you don't have to sew complicated patterns. You can stick to the same, make yourself a capsule wardrobe, basically, of some really basic patterns. Learn some basic pattern making so that you can, do some different, change from a darted to a princess. But you can use the same darn pattern over and over again and just use really pretty fabric and switch up your seaming techniques. And there you go. You don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. Just use really nice fabric and everything looks beautiful, no matter how simple it is.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Really great. So, yeah, I think I could just keep talking to you forever, but
it's a curse.
This does have to end.
Yes,
sometimes
it does.
But I really do thank you so much for taking the time to come on to my show. And it was just such a pleasure to have this opportunity. And because you weren't paid for this.
Nope.
And I'm very, very, very happy that that like we said earlier, I mean, it's from your heart and you do things out of joy and you help other people out. And I think that it shows and that we're all lucky to have you in our world.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I was honored to be asked.
Thank you. This was Katrina Walker, and we will have all the links to her website and Spoiled Sheep and everything in the show notes. Please help support this podcast by following me on Instagram at stephanie.socha.design and my YouTube channel at Make and Decorate. Also, check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/makeanddecorate, where you can subscribe to receive an extra podcast episode every month. Until next time, keep making and decorating.